Today I'm joined by Crestani, a former speech pathologist turned soul activator, intuitive channel, and founder of Willow Healing. Through a Willow Healing Matters podcast, Substack, and spiritual coaching work, Catherine helps people recover from burnout, trauma, and big life transitions to reconnect with their inner authority, trust their intuition, and step into more authentic, spiritually grounded life. Gosh, you're quite busy then.
I am.
Thank you so much for joining. It's very, very kind of you. I did want to start by just taking you back a little bit, just to understand what life was like for you during your formative years. Do you think the 16-year-old Catherine would recognize who you are and what you do today?
No, she would not at all. Like, not at all. Like, I was the high achiever, the overachiever, the people pleaser, always making sure. Well, I was a little bit of a rebel, but I do it without the intention of being caught. So, I was very much at pushing boundaries, but I also didn't want to get in trouble at the same time. So I would do a lot of things. And I was very clever. Actually, now I think about it, some of the things I used to get up to. But at the same time, I I didn't understand a lot of the things that I felt, or I didn't understand a lot of the things that I was going through, like especially when I started to get older and go to parties, and I would feel really, I would get sick a lot going to parties, and I put it down to the food or something I drank, but it was actually me picking up on the feelings of everybody else. So I didn't actually understand what I was going through at that time. And even I would have these moments of intuition and intuitive hits, and I didn't understand really what they meant either. It was more just like in that moment, I'd be like, oh, how do I know that? Oh, and then just kind of dismiss it. So I was a very much driven, like wanted to just step into, like I knew I wanted to help people and I knew I wanted to work
Mhm.
with children, but I didn't know anything else apart from that. And even the career I landed in as a speech language pathologist for a long time, my mum just suggested it to me because I wanted to be a pediatrician. I had my heart of being a pediatrician, which now I look back on that and I go, I'm so far out of the medical system, it's insane. I wonder, I sit there and go, if I went down that path, I think I'd almost dislike that version of me that I'd become to fit into that system. So life always has a bigger plan and an understanding to get to where we are today. So no, I don't think she would go, whoa, how did we even get there? More than anything.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've got a 16-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter, and for both of them, I'm sure for you in Australia, obviously the education system is set up to steer in certain directions. When you have we have sort of careers officers here, you go and talk to them. But what do you want to do? Right. Well, what do you enjoy? Right. Okay, you can be a doctor, teacher, nurse, accountant. But they're still fairly traditional in what they do. So what was it that I guess inspired, compelled, drove you to move away from a recognized traditional career as a speech pathologist into something less traditional in intuitive healing? What was the journey like?
Well, it was a series of awakenings, if you will, or coming
Mhm.
back to myself. And it went through my personal life to start because often we have to clean up our personal life before we can shine light on our career, right? And I was using my
Mm.
career to mask my personal life. But the thing was, there was always this deeper yearning that I was meant for something more, or that like nothing fulfilled me. So I was meeting all the goals on the outside, and everyone would tell me how amazing my life was, but really on the inside, it wasn't filling me up. It wasn't exciting me, and it would. Or if it would capture my attention for a little bit of time and then it wouldn't actually expand and go from there. So
Mm.
in my first marriage, I very much lost myself to that because not because my ex-husband asked me to do that, but I actually took it on myself that to stay together, we had to be compatible. So we had to like the same things, or we had to always be doing things together to the point that I actually just kept giving up parts of myself. There was no kind of give or take. It was always me giving up things which I chose to do to the point that I didn't even know who I was anymore. So once that, and I actually used work to mask. So instead of going home, I would stay longer and longer at the office. and just avoid going home and seeing my ex-husband completely, you know. And now I can look back and go, oh wow, that was definitely a red flag in that moment, but I didn't
Yeah.
see it whilst I was in it. So then I built up this amazing business partnership with my business partner. It ended up being a 7-figure business. We had 8 full-time speech therapists, we had admin staff, like we expanded and blew up our business, but to the point where again, I was always defending who I was because I had to continually put on these roles or these masks to show up as someone I wasn't.
Mm.
And in the meantime, you know, I kept getting all these children with high needs on my caseload. All these children with autism were constantly, that was my day. I'd see 18 children with autism spectrum disorder back to back, half-hour clients. And it's a lot. Like I occasionally get a lisp walk in. I know it sounds really weird. And I'd be like, oh my goodness, we're just doing a speech sound, you know, not. And it wasn't that I didn't love those children, but it was like this different level of energy. But what I didn't realize is that they just saw that I was this safe place to come to. And that's why I kept attracting those clients and kept pulling them into my space. I think in my whole career of nearly 20 years, and working with so many children with autism, I think I only had 2 or 3 never like me or never get along with me, which is pretty amazing when I think about it now. But at the same time, again, it was this like, well, you know, I'm not, so I kind of, I say that was my nasty divorce, like leaving that business partnership. And then I still had built up my own company in the background, which was like a 6-figure company. And yeah, I don't do things small. I'm this overachiever. So, but I was never happy. And I built it in such a way that everything came to me. If like the systems weren't working, they called me. I never got a holiday. I never got a break. I say I was working 24/7 because my insomnia kept me awake. I had panic attacks. I had anxiety. I had, you know, chronic stress, adrenal fatigue, burnout, all those fun things that come with that. But again, it was because I wasn't doing something I was passionate and excited about. Because if you're really aligned with what you're doing, you can keep pushing. I am really prone to burnout. That's my design. I tend to burn a bit too hard, but I've learned to listen to that. So through all that, still, I was like, I'm meant to be doing something else. I don't know what it is. I know I'm really good at my job. I know, and I don't know why. At this point, I didn't understand why, but I know I'm really good at my job. I know I'm really good with my clients, but I'm not fulfilled, you know. So I went in to my naturopath, who I was seeing quite often to keep me from my stress from eating me and basically keeping me alive. And I went to book him one day, and I noticed that his partner had this new booking on his system, and I said, "Oh, you know what's this?" And he's like, "Oh, that." And her name is Carly, and he's like, "You know, yeah, Carly's got this new offering. You should really do it." And I went, "Okay, I should do it." And she became my spiritual mentor, and it was like coming home, right? It was
Mhm.
just, you know, it was so, I had a really rapid awakening too in terms of what we talk about in the spiritual world. It was very quick. It was like my soul was looking for it and yearning for it, and it was just waiting. It just needed me to open that door, and everything started to come back really, really quickly. So, of course, my dark night of the soul, or if anyone's not sure what that is, it's basically the tests and tribulations you have to go through to shed identities. That's the best way I can describe it. Was my company falling apart because my husband was saying, "You're not happy, you need to sell the business." But the part of me that grew it from the ground up was my baby, right? You know,
Mhm.
I had to come to that on my own terms. So the universe helped me along. So in the space of 3 months, in the first month, in a space of a week, I had 3 staff resign. And by this point, I'd already decided I wanted to step back, focus more on spiritual work, see where that was taking me. I also had to look after my health, and I really wanted to spend time with my boys, like my husband and my son. And so I was pretty distraught when I had 3 leave in a week because it
Mhm.
was a big gap to fill, and I took it on as I would have to fill that gap. I would have to pick those clients up. You know, I would have to have these conversations with the parents, telling them their therapist is leaving, making me feel like a failure. And I ended up in a ball on the floor. You know, I couldn't get up. I was crying. I was not okay. You know, and my husband and my son were like, "You can get up." My spirit team were like, "You can get up." But at the same time, I didn't want to. Like, I was just kind of done. So I did finally get up because obviously I'm here talking to you right now. And then a month later, in the space of a week, I had another 3 staff resign. And I still hadn't replaced the first 3. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I was so angry, Andrew. Like, I was yelling at the universe, incredibly, incredibly angry. And I was angry. I was really angry. I was like, what do you want from me? Anyway, got over the anger. A month later, in the space of a week, another 3 staff resigned. And by this point, I went, you know what? These people aren't meant to be in my life anymore. And I'm not meant to own this company anymore. I'm either getting someone to buy it, or when the lease is done, I'm done. Like, that was to the point I'd gotten to. Fortunately, the universe did send me a buyer, a beautiful, beautiful man who bought the business, and I worked for him for a little bit. But at the same time, it was, I had to go through all of that. And it was then I had to start to try on identities, or I guess roles, with my spiritual gifts, because I am actually quite an old soul, so I can do lots of different things. So I had to find where I kind of sat in all of that. So I got a coach, I did all those things. But in the end, what I found working with the coach was I was taking on what he wanted me to do, not what I wanted to do and what I was feeling pulled to do. And he had a very different approach to working, and he had a very hustle culture. I do not sit well in that. I do not. That's what led me to burnout in the first place. So when I actually realized that and stepped outside that, and don't get me wrong, he helped support me through facing my worst story, because when I sold my business, I believed I didn't work hard for that money and I pushed it all away. So I had to work through that. I had to work through coming back to that. And then through all of that, I was like, actually, who do I want to be? I want to, and like my naturopath asked me about 5 or 6 years ago, if you could do anything in the world, what could it be? And I was like, I want to write. And he goes, so go write. But I didn't know what that meant at the time, and I didn't know how it would look. It was just there, the seed, right? It was planted. So I did. I started writing my novel 15 minutes a day. I committed to myself just writing these 15 minutes a day. And I ended up writing a 90,000 word novel. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've written a novel, And then I had to go through a whole bit of a journey with publishing that and all these self-saboteur and all those fun things. But then in the meantime, I wrote another book as well, and I published that one first, so, and then I ended up writing for Brains magazine, and then I write my Substacks, and then writing just became this integral part of my life. But then through what I was writing, I didn't even notice, especially the novel, was it became a reflection of what was happening in society, and they're all the clients I started to attract. So all of a sudden, I'm working with people on how to step out of relationships that no longer, work for them, whether it's romantic, career, with life, whatever that looks like, how to actually access their dreams and make them reality. And suddenly my cup started to fill up because I was excited about what I was doing. So some days I get up at like 2 or 3 a.m. to do interviews, or to, step into these different beautiful tribes that I've ended up in. And people are like, how do you do that? I was like, because I'm excited about it, and you can find the energy to do it when you're passionate about it. So it's a bit of a journey.
A hell of a journey, And so, your novel, My Virtual Obsession, it sounds very, very timely. I was watching a TV program, and I'm sure everybody watches TV programs like this the other day. And it was talking about people's relationship with their AI, and how people are increasingly having AI boyfriends, girlfriends, etc., and seeing them as true partners. And I wondered, where did the idea for the novel come from? And could you just touch on some of the things that you cover in the novel for people?
Yeah, so how my novel was birthed is a bit different to what other writers might say, but I actually dreamed out the whole book as a movie, the whole thing.
Wow.
So I woke up and I was like, I need to write this into a story. So I wrote down the synopsis right there and then. I didn't actually understand the depths of how it become a reflection until I started reading it back after I wrote it. So when I wrote it, I actually went into this automatic kind of writing mode and was just pretty much just letting whatever flow through me. I was a conduit in that moment. I just let the book come through me. And I say it was my spirit writer, but now I realize it was just my higher self. It was just a version of me ready to write this book, right? But what ended up being was an exploration of how loneliness can lead to us creating these.
I love you, Robin. Hi, sweetheart.
So how loneliness can lead to us creating these false realities about our life. So it can lead to obsession, and especially in this day and age where people are like, oh, I sent them a DM and they didn't open it yet. Why didn't they open it yet? I was like,
Yeah.
well, that's just okay. Oh, but you actually have a conversation. And this is what started to come to me as well as I was finishing up the book, these people who were coming with these questions. And I was like, I I I don't understand personally. I'm like, I don't understand. I understand how we can get lost in the fantasy of what could be when we start to, meet somebody and we start to obsess over, oh my goodness, this could be the one, or this could be the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So this is what the book starts to actually reflect on, and it does it from two very different perspectives. From Clive, who is the person looking for love and actually starting to question his values and what he's showing up in life, and he's built this amazing company, but does he actually want it? And starting to question where that is, but also questioning like why he's pushing aside these red flags. So he's getting all these red flags start to come up, and it's like he's pushing it to the side. It's almost like he's ignoring his instincts, right? He's ignoring his intuition. And then on the flip side of that, our obsessive little stalker, Anna the book nerd, we get to see from her perspective how she can develop this obsession and how she can get to the point where she's at too. And what it is, it ends up being a portal and this deeper reflection of how technology can allow us to create these fantasies of the world, but also how loneliness can drive us to make decisions that we normally wouldn't make, and to ignore the red flags and to ignore those decisions, because this is how we've been kind of conditioned in society, is start to numb those things, right? Because we listen to the external noise. All right, you're 30, you should be married now, thinking about having children. I know from a woman point of view, right? Should be 30, should be having children. You should, this is what your life should look like. You should have your house, your car, your 2.5 kids, whatever. But in the end, it's like, do I want that? And we can get so lost in what everyone else is telling us how our life should look like that we get lost in, we just actually lose ourselves in that. So this is why it's called My Virtual Obsession, because it started as a virtual intimacy, virtual dating, and then it turned into this massive obsession of a life of what she imagined it could be rather than what it actually was.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people listening, a lot of that story would resonate with their own, really. And it does feel like a big irony that we have this amazing technology, and you can't deny in lots of ways it's amazing, that allows us to connect with anybody across the world. So you're in Australia, I'm in London, we're talking, I can see you, I can hear you, it's fabulous. It's obviously not the same as being in the same room, sharing a juice or a coffee, whatever, that would be different, and we'd feel something different, I'm sure. But whilst it allows us to connect, and you said about loneliness, I think the World Health Organization has said we're in an epidemic of loneliness. And I wonder what your thoughts were on technology, social media. I know Australia has just banned social media for under 16s. Just
Kind of.
yeah. Whether it's whether it's a power, is it a power for good? Is it all bad? Where do you sit on the technology connection discussion?
Well, I feel the first part of that is the loneliness issue, right? Being
Yeah.
alone isn't a bad thing. It's when you are avoiding yourself in the loneliness that it becomes an issue. And that is often when we then turn to technology to distract us from having that time with ourselves. Because often when we're
Mm.
with ourselves, we have to face things that might be uncomfortable. Like, oh, why am I creating this life around me? Oh, instead of dealing with that, I'm going to go, doom scroll for an hour and not actually interact with anything. And, or, I wonder what my life would have been like with that person from high school. I'm going to go down a deep rabbit hole now and go stalk them on every level. I'm going to go look at their LinkedIn. I'm going to go look at their Facebook, their Instagram. Oh no, they're on private setting. I'm going to see if I can get in a back. You know, this is where these obsessions and this loneliness can have. But then on the flip side of that, people are giving their voice up, or their intuition and their inner wisdom, they're giving it up to technology. And this is like touched upon in the book too, because so often I've met people who will just depend on it. And like you brought up, the AI companions and the boyfriends and the girlfriends. And I was talking to a relationship coach the other week, and she said some people are using it to such a point that they use it to reply to their partner's SMSs. Like instead of just writing back to them, they're putting it in chat to write the reply. She goes, look, if you're in a point of turmoil in a relationship and you need that ideas of how to respond, that is different from writing the response for you. And my favorite example that I've heard is, say you go to leave the house and your gut says, I should really grab an umbrella. I feel it's going to rain. But instead you go, let me just check the weather app. So you pull up your little technology, right? And it's like, it's going to be sunny, bright skies today. No chance of rain. Oh, well, I'm not going to bring the umbrella. It's a pain in the bum to carry. I'm just going to leave it at home. 2 hours later, it starts pouring down rain. And you're like, oh, I should have brought that umbrella. In that moment, you have stopped trusting yourself and put your authority and put your trust in a device rather than you. And so the other thing that's been a big thing talked about, especially in the indie author community, I didn't even know what indie author meant until recently. Basically, it's just a fancy way of saying you're self-published or you go with a small publishing company. Anyway, but the big thing they talk about is like, oh, no AI, no AI. And I was like, but at what extent is it no AI? Like, my husband designed my cover, but he used AI to help refine it, right? I wrote my book myself, but I used AI to help edit it. And it's still my voice. It's still my story, you know, but this is where this distinction is starting to get cloudy, right? Like where do we start and AI begins, or where are we losing our power to that? And I talked with a few of my friends and we all talk about this, the amount of arguments we have with it. I don't know if you're someone that's used it to this point, where my co-host on my show, Connections from Beyond, he talks about treat it as the lazy employee. You can't expect it to give you all the answers, and they're not always right. You know, you have to push back. And then another show I was on the other day, he said, I told my chat to go have annual leave, you know, like, so this is where, you know, if you're writing or you're creating something, you still need to create it yourself. Otherwise, you are giving away your voice and your power to the AI or the technology or whatever it is. And this is the same even with, you know, social media and Instagram. And it's what we get portrayed is just a portion. It's just a snapshot and Instagram, right? It's not the whole story. You know, I know for me, I have a certain theme at the moment, which is talking the whole side of me. That's not all of me, but it's a snapshot of who I am in that moment. And this is where it gets forgotten. So instead, when people go on dates or they go have a phone call or they make that next step to grow into their relationship, they're relying on a snapshot of what they've had instead of actually asking the person themselves, you know, what are your dreams? What are your visions? What are you excited about? They just assume they know. And this is the other danger, is that we get lost in this portrayal or just a one perspective of who that person is rather than going deeper. Or we then go pop it into chat and go, hey, this person's birthday's this and this is my birthday. Are we compatible? It's like, no, like, don't worry about that. You know, technically on paper, my husband and I are the least compatible star signs. He's an Aries, I'm a Cancer. He runs in and charges and my Cancer's like, I don't understand what's happening right now. I'm having an emotional moment. But in other aspects, we complement each other so well, you know, so it's, you know, where do you want to believe? You know, are you going to have the experience or do you want someone else to dictate it for you?
It's just very hard. I mean, as I said before, my daughter's away at uni studying philosophy. and she won't use AI at all for anything, for research, for anything like that. She just doesn't think it's the right thing to do. And I think, gosh, is that holding it back? Whereas my son is sort of much more aware of it and much more sensitive to what it can offer and what it can do. But I think there's almost that certainly a lot of schools here, education here is very much don't use AI as like a blanket statement without really helping people understand what it does and what it delivers. So it's not going anywhere as such. It's something that can be a tool and can support and can do lots of good things. But I think people have this, yeah, either it's the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, or it's the best thing that's going to ever happen to humanity. It's going to save the world. It's probably somewhere in between.
I
I would think.
I've been in both schools, Andrew, so I fully resonate with your daughter and I fully resonate with your son. But I was so resistant to it, but I'm like, it's coming whether I'm resistant to it or not. It's still here. But the amount of time it saves me on things, and it does
Yeah,
things I hate. Like,
yeah,
and it was really interesting because was having this reading done, and this person said to me, what came through was write down what you're good at and write down what you're not good at in terms of like business, life, blah, blah, blah.
hmm,
And my not good at is like SEOs, social media, marketing, all those fun things. And as I was writing that, intuitively, I got this thing, just use chat. I was like, what? Like, yeah. So I started going, okay, well, let's put my podcast show notes in, put all the details, upload the transcript, and see what it comes back with. And it just wrote the whole SEO thing to put into YouTube so I could actually be discovered. And it took it a minute. It
yeah,
would take me hours to figure that out, not to
hmm,
mention how to do it or figure out what the keywords are and all those sorts of things. And I just look at that and I go, okay, well, I can use that as a tool to enhance how I'm sharing my message in the world, or I can waste my time doing pointless tasks that I hate doing that drain my energy, and then it's not going to assess me. The point is, if you use it to replace you, that is where the problem lies. Is it use you as a tool to assist you? That is where it can be incredibly powerful.
yeah. The I mean, you talked just earlier on about somebody using chat to create the response to their partner, etc. I think we're getting to a stage now. Certainly, if you're applying for a lot of jobs now, a lot of people use AI to create their application. AI, the other company reads your application. It ends up being just AI talking to AI. And I think, well, when does the human ever get involved in this discussion? It's becoming very, very different now in the sense of the job market than it was when I was my children's age applying for jobs. You just sort of wrote something, rang somebody, talked to somebody, it was face to face. Whereas now it's very much if your AI doesn't like what their AI is saying, vice versa, you don't progress. That's the bit that feels disingenuous and a little bit false. But hopefully it'll move on. Um, so in a lot of the work that you do, you integrate quantum energy work, psychic insight, spiritual coaching. I wondered how do you discern whether a message or insight you're receiving is trustworthy and worth acting on? Have you become better and better at tuning into what's relevant to you, or is it something that you're still working on?
Well, do you know, I'm going to share a story. So I wanted some extra income coming in. At that point, I wasn't attracting as many clients. So I
Hmm.
went, surely there's a job for a psychic, right? Turns out there's still psychic hotlines. I had no idea. So I applied for a job for a psychic hotline. And I have to say, if you want to learn how to get rid of the doubts, really trust the message coming through, and learn how to do it really quickly, go go work for a psychic hotline, because I had to be that quick and I had to be strong and I had to trust myself and trust the messages that were coming through. The first week, I'm not going to lie, was hell. It was terrible. Like, all my doubts, everything came up. I'm sitting there with my spirit team going, is this what I'm meant to be doing? They're like, we are so happy you're doing this, you're accelerating so many skills. I'm like, okay. But then I learned, okay, let's go back to the basics. What is this intention I want to set whenever I'm working with anybody that comes through, or anyone that I
Hmm.
work with? And this, I know it's such a cliche thing, but setting that intention for the highest and greatest good. But then I add on to that and I say the highest and greatest good for all, because information I want coming through isn't going to impact me. So I want both me and my client protected. And then I add the other element for the divine blueprint. So what's perfect for us as a soul in that moment. And then I add the other element, which is for right here, right now. because I have a gift where I can see people's timelines, which means I can see all the possibilities that could happen, in their life. And I always choose to see the highest one. So I want to support people to get to their best outcome, right? When I'm working. The problem is nothing is absolute,
Mm-hmm.
So when someone asks me a question, they're like, oh, will it be in a week? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, there are a lot of things. And sometimes if we expect an outcome to happen, we then push it away and we miss the outcome of how that's going to happen. So that can be a thing too. So I'm very wary of this. And I tell people, I said, look, I can't give you a timeline, because if I give you a timeline, you're going to restrict what's going to happen. And you're going to think, oh, well, I meant to meet the man of my dreams in 3 weeks. So you're not going to look before then, but maybe he'll come into your life sooner, or maybe he'll come a little bit later because he has free choice and you have free choice. So how does that look? So this is where it's really come down to how to explain that to people and get them to understand, and then people are like, oh, can you look into the energy of this person? I'm like, well, actually, I can't, because that's actually a conflict. I can see their energy coming towards you because that's impacting you, but I can't go in and check what's happening for them right now or exactly where they are. Like, if you ask me a question, are they telling the truth? I will get a yes or no, but it's what they want to portray to you as well. So I can only see what the energy coming at you. So through all of this, it's been really learning to be very good on my spiritual hygiene as well. That's such a important thing when you're working this way, making sure that you are clear in your energy so that you can be clear, and that you're not taking your judgments in, because sometimes things come through and I'm like, and I'm like, wait, that's the Catherine getting in the way. I just have to deliver the message of whatever that might be. And it doesn't mean parts of me doesn't come through, because the people we attract often are going through similar things to what we are. So I had a client last night and she was talking about this situation. I said, oh, your guides are actually sharing to me to share this story of exactly what happened to me. And she goes, oh, really? I said, yeah, I don't normally share that personal kind of thing. She goes, no, I want to hear it. I want to hear it. I'm like, okay. And for her, she needed to hear that someone else had been through that journey and it had
Yeah.
felt that same way. And this is where you as a soul, it's really important to bring your perspective, because the people you are attracting into your life want to hear your story. They want to hear what's happening. And so I always check in, am I sharing that? Am I sharing that? They're like, yeah, we want you to share this, or we want you to do that. And I also use my discernment in that moment, and I make sure, because sometimes I get shown more than what they're allowed to know, the client I'm working with. The reason I get shown that is to help me to coach them to understand what's happening for them. But I don't want to take away from their journey. Like, I don't want them to miss that lesson that they should have learned, or I don't want them to miss that vital key that they have to figure out. So I check, can I share that? Can't I share that? And continually check in, but I do it really quickly because it takes practice, right? The more you practice and exercise, it's like a muscle. The more you exercise your psychic muscles, the quicker it will work for you. To the point now I can just tune in and tune out. And I really appreciate that that's where my gifts have gotten to that point now. But at the same time, I still check. If something's a bit murky, I'll check. I'll ask questions. I'll try and get clarity and go deeper. And it's always been that open to learn and not bringing your judgments in. Because when we start to judge the information, that's when our ego starts to take hold of it. Whereas when we just accept that we're the conduit. And I'll be honest, Andrew, sometimes I don't even remember half the things that come out of my mouth. And then I'll have someone go, hey, remember when you said that? I'm like,
No.
no. But tell me,
Yeah.
what did I say? They said, oh, you said this. I said, wow, that sounds brilliant. Amazing. I'm glad I said that. But this is where it's really like learning your spiritual ethics, learning your spiritual hygiene, and also carrying that intention with you. And yes, sometimes the information might not be 100% accurate, but that's the point. It's never going to be 100% accurate because you're always changing the moment. And what I liken it to is, say you go to a reading, like a tarot reader, for example, and then the tarot reader says, okay, at the moment, your relationship, it's going to break down. This is going to happen and do. Now you've got that information and you go, you know what? I don't want that to happen. What can I possibly do to change that outcome? So you make different choices. You might have conversations you've been putting off. You might have these conversations with your partner and you've changed the outcome. Now, a person can see that as I was inspired to make a change in that moment and put things in place to change where I was going. Or they'll go, oh, that tarot reader was full of crap. They were so wrong. That didn't happen. So this is where things can get skewed because we always have the power to change. Yes, we're heading on a trajectory. Yes, there's some fate. There's some reason that we're here. But how we get there can change dramatically depending on the choices we make in every moment.
So you don't think our futures are preordained? You think we do have free will to make changes and adjustments?
It's really interesting because I just had this conversation last week with my co-host. So we talked about alternate realities, but every
Yeah.
time you make a choice, your soul is still experiencing the opposite, which is really funny. So when you get to the end of life, you reflect back and you see, oh, if I chose to marry that person, that's what my life would have looked like. Or if I chose to not do that, that's what, or this is the path I chose. So you can still get to experience it because our soul wants to experience all these things. But at the same time, you always can choose, you can choose to shut down your gifts or you can choose to use them. But it's that yearning that we listen to, that our compass is our heart, our soul, and we have an idea of why we chose to incarnate on earth in this moment. So, what is your soul mission? And often when you have that deep yearning, it's because you're not aligned with where you're going as a soul. You're not, taking the steps to get there. And you could have that yearning your whole life and on your deathbed suddenly have the epiphany, oh, that's what I was meant to do, But again, it's how it's contracted. Even we were talking about when you write your soul contract coming in, you have different exit points. So sometimes, there's multiple chances you could die. It's just where you choose not to experience that or choose to experience that in that moment. This is why people have near-death experiences. It's their chance to go, do I stay or do I keep going? And this is, I had a client and she was in severe pain and she's like, I just want to die. But then she got put in a situation, she nearly did die. And in that moment, all she did was pray to be kept alive. And I said, well, isn't that a reflection to you? You truly don't want to die. So when we start to look at those lives and analysis, so, I have had this moment many times, right? Because I'm not big noting myself here, but I can do many things and many things bring me joy. But it's like, what am I most aligned with in this moment? So I had an opportunity to become a creator and I sat back and I went, yeah, the money sounds good if I can get it to work. But the idea of sitting in front of a computer for 4 to 5 hours creating content just sounds terrible. I rather just have the content that I'm creating because I feel to, out of my podcast or however that comes out. And, but then one version of me probably did say yes to that and went and experienced that. And this is where, we still have, no matter what, we still have free will, but the universe designs to put us back on track of what our soul came here to do. And this is where there's no such things as coincidences or accidents. Everything is designed to keep us in alignment to where our soul is leading us. And we can choose to act upon that or we can choose to ignore it. That's where the free will comes in.
Okay. So how would you say your relationship to spirituality has changed over time? I guess we often have early ideas that come from our parents, or from school, come from society, and as we get older, some people explore it for themselves. And I wonder what does the sacred spirituality mean to you at the moment? How does that show up in your daily routines?
Well, spirituality has been like a bit of an adventure, really.
Mhm.
So I went through growing up, I grew up in the pseudo-Catholic family. When I say pseudo-Catholic, it's like we don't eat meat on Good Friday and we go to church maybe once a year kind of thing, right? But Catholic, technically. So, growing up in that,
Same, actually, yeah, same.
yeah, but I didn't agree with so much of what the church said. So much of it, even as a young age, I didn't agree with. And I didn't understand why. I just didn't agree with it. And then I remember I went to a very Anglican private school. And we would ask, do you believe in Jesus? And I'm like, I do. And then I got asked the question again. It's like, do you believe in Jesus? And I'm like, no. but it was me actually rebelling against the idea that I was portrayed of Jesus Christ in his life and everything, and how we got told, you have to die for your sin, all that stuff. That was me. And it was this, my school actually pushed back and made us have like a semi-intervention where we stopped believing. And I was like, wow, there was a lot of things in religion that made me question the constraints that we got put in. But there was still this deep believing in me that there was definitely something bigger. Like I believed in signs. I believed in coincidence. Well, not coincidences, things happening in threes. It's always been my whole life, things happening in threes. And I would have these moments of clarity. So when I was in high school, my sister got in the car one day and she's like, oh, you'll never guess what happened to my friend. And I said, oh, yeah, she was riding a horse and she fell off and broke her arm. And she goes, oh, did you see her? And I went, no. She goes, that's exactly what happened. I'm like, what? And my mum, my sister and I, we just all paused in that moment. And I couldn't explain it. I was just like, what? How did I even know that? That doesn't make any sense. Like I would drive past a car accident and I would just know if someone died or not. I could not go into cemeteries for years. Cemeteries freaked me out. I didn't understand why, because obviously I could sense all the spirits. But at that point I had no idea, I didn't understand. But it was just this deeper yearning for something bigger. And then when I came back to my spiritual awakening, and I had a really beautiful mentor, and I got so much aha moments. And one of my gifts is Claircognizance, which is I get instant downloads. So I would just understand things really quickly. And because my soul has incarnated on many different fragments so many times, I had this bigger wealth of knowledge that I could pull from as well. So spirituality for me was about, okay, what's the next layer I need to peel back to come back to the true essence of me? What's that identity we need to shift? What's that next layer we need to think? And what's the next thing I'm curious about that I want to learn about? So, at the start of the year, this is very woo, but I said, hey, spirit team, I want to learn more about galactics. And boop, in my inbox arrives this email from a guest I'd had who was channeling this new galactic species. And in the picture, I went, oh my goodness, that's me in a parallel life. And so I reached out to him and we ended up doing a special episode where he channeled through. And then he's like, hey, this would be really cool to do long term. And I was like, actually, I'd love to do a podcast for you. And boom, a new podcast is born. And all of a sudden I'm channeling galactic energies with working with another person. So I was like, wow, look how being curious led me to a new passion and led me to this new thing. So I find that spirituality is being curious and following what excites you and brings you joy in the moment. And you might try on something for a little bit. Like I tried on medical intuition. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a medical intuitive. Maybe this is why I wanted to be a doctor, right? Putting the pieces together. Then I tried it and I went, oh no, I don't want to do this. I was good at it, but I did not want to do it. I was like, I don't want to have all these people in pain, and not to say that I don't have those clients, but I don't want to attract them constantly. I don't want people in the victim mode. I actually want people who are ready to change and want that support doing that, and I can apply those skills if I want it. So spirituality for me is just the belief that there's something bigger than you and that your soul is here to achieve something. That I feel is what spirituality is.
Do you ever get, and I'm not sure what the right words are, but do you ever get frustrated by people? So, and I'm just thinking, so if you go into Sydney and you're sort of walking along and you're walking along a pit street and people are sort of head down and walking along with on the phone and just going from sort of office to train to office to train to office, and you sort of look at people and think, my goodness, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you ever get frustrated, or does it, because you have such an ability to connect and hear and listen and communicate and intuit and all these things, and you sort of look around and it's not only you that can do that. Other people are they've just encased themselves somehow and blocked off everything else. Do you ever sort of want to just walk down the street and say, what are you doing? How do you does it frustrate you sometimes?
Sometimes. And I think you brought up a really important point, Andrew, is that we all have spiritual gifts. We all have psychic abilities. We just have numbed and forgotten how to connect with them. And this is why I say it's like a muscle you have to keep executing. It's funny because one of the things that frustrates me, my husband and I talk about all the time, is when you go to a restaurant and people are there, like families, and every single one of them are on their phone instead of actually having
Yeah.
a conversation. To the point that when my son was younger, we never gave him devices when he was younger. Now it's like that's our currency, screen time, but that's fine. That's how we work, But when he was younger, we would go to a restaurant and bring coloring. We'd bring the
Hmm.
crayons, we'd bring little trains because he was into Thomas the Tank Engine. We would bring things to entertain him. To the point that all the waitresses and waiters used to come up to us and compliment us for not having our child on a screen. And I was like, wow, when has this become the norm?
That's quite a low bar, isn't it?
I was like, when did that become the norm? But, when I walk around and see people so lost in the drama or so lost in these stories of themselves, when there's so many bigger things in the world, I actually had to learn how to say, thank you, I'm grateful that journey's not mine. Because otherwise you get stuck in the judgment of it and you do get stuck in the frustration. But what I find the most interesting is, I can, like with my gifts, I can access any piece of information that you want. And you're asking me why that person didn't open that message of yours on social media. And I'm just sitting there going, you can ask anything in the world. And that's what you're most concerned about. And 99% of the time, you know what the question is, that what the feedback is that comes. Do you really want that relationship, and what are you choosing in that moment? It always comes back to, why do you care so much about that? Like, why are you not focusing on you and showing up as you rather than worrying about the motives behind the other person? And this is where everyone's got their own journey. The thing that actually frustrated me the most was when I would be working with a client, or someone I knew, and they'd be going through this massive, really cool spiritual awakening, and then they get scared and then they abandon everything they learned. And I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, you were so close to getting to like this next level, and then you got scared and you went back. And that was like one of the hardest things I had to learn doing what I do, to accept that people just make their own choices and that people are on their own journey, and to let it happen that way. I get the most frustrated with my husband, if I'm honest. So
That's allowed.
yeah. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm not going to save you. Like, that's something I had to learn too. I'm like, I'm not here to save you. If you know all the things I can do, it's your choice if you choose to ask me to support you in that. I can help you heal. I can help you shift things. But I'm not going to go push that onto him. He has to make the choice to come to me, and then we'll swap into different roles in that moment. But I'm not going to sit there and chase him either.
Mm. Just a tiny personal example of connection or recognizing signs. And both my parents died in the last couple of years, and I sort of increasingly used to see robins, the little bird in the UK with a red breast. And when I was sort of walking with the dog, and for some reason I got it in my head, it was my mum coming to sort of see me and just
Because it
keep an eye on me.
was. Yeah.
I go swimming most mornings, and I was sort of swimming outside, and I was swimming up and down. There was a robin that sort of came and was sort of watching me. I don't know, in this tree, and I said, okay, if that really is my mom coming to see me, I want there to be three robins on that post when I sort of turn around and do it. And I've never ever seen three robins together. They're very territorial. They don't sort of share space together. And this is like, it probably won't sound crazy to you, but to some people. So I turned back and swam back the other way. And as I swam back, there were three robins on the post. And I thought, well, okay, I can either accept that that is my mom and that literally is the confirmation I asked for, or I can say, oh, it's just coincidence. But I've never seen it before, never seen it since I asked for it, and it was there. And I'm not asking for a freebie, but does that make sense?
Yeah.
That I asked for it and it was there, and
Because it's your mum.
that's the sort of proof that I asked for. I was given the proof. So then why wouldn't I? What reason would I possibly have for not accepting that proof? Does that make sense?
Because your logic's trying to explain it away. And this
Yeah.
is where our ego kind of kicks in. And it reminded me so much of a client I had, Andrew. But as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, the Robin's your mum. 100% it's your mum. And this is, my husband's very logical. So he will try and explain away things to the point where I'm like, I'm not even going to tell you because I don't want you to ruin the magic. That's actually what I say to him. I'm like, I'm going to let the magic happen. So I had this beautiful client, and I was doing a reading for him, and his brother came through, and his brother had passed. And it was a bit sad, like the circumstances around it. But his brother was like this big Irish bloke, right? Like manly Irish man. And he said, look, when he's missing me, tell him that I will show up as a butterfly. I'm like, a butterfly? Yes, I'm going to show up as a butterfly. I'm like, all right, I'm just the messenger. I'm just going to pass it on. And so sure enough, my client's like, a butterfly? I was like, I know, this is just what's coming through. So, anyway, the next day, he's sitting out the back of his house and a butterfly lands on his hand, and it did not leave for over an hour. Like, they filmed it, they took photos of it, and he just knew it was his brother, and he sat there and he was just so grateful to have that connection. And then fast forward a few months, it was St. Patrick's Day. And normally they go celebrate it because, go have a few beers and that sort of thing. Anyway, so he was up in Sydney in an office building, like 20 stories up, in a conference room by himself, just missing his brother. And on the window of the conference room lands a butterfly. Now, how can we explain that away, Andrew? Like, this is where it really comes to, okay, I accept that that's the truth. I've had so many other clients like that where their loved ones will pass through something. I had a good friend, and her husband passed, and he said, whenever you see a yellow flower, it's me. And she went home that day and her whole front lawn was covered in yellow dandelions. Like, you can't even make those sort of things up. And this is where our logic wants to explain it away, but our heart knows better. Like, your heart knew it was your mum. Your heart knew that Robin was your mum, but at that same time, our logic tries to say, well, it can't be real because that's just how we were conditioned. That's how we were brought up, that, there's no such things as fairies and dragons and, signs from the universe. But really there is. There is so many things that happen. And the more that you start to be open to it, the more the signs will come into your life. It's like, how do you always look at the clock when it's 11:11? Or for me at the moment, it's 2:22, right? How do you know to look at the clock right at that time? It's not like you're looking up every minute to wait for it. It's like right when you look, or the time will be 2:22. Your battery's at 22%. Your petrol has 222 kilometers left on the tank. Like, you cannot create those circumstances. They're there to give you feedback on what's happening. And if you ask for a sign, you need to look for it too. So you got the sign, you looked for it, but then you still tried to explain it away, rather than accepting it. And I remember listening to this podcast, and this lady, she was about to sign a lease. I don't remember who it was, but I love this story. So she was about to sign a lease to have a bricks and mortar building. She was so excited. And it was the day before she was meant to sign it. And she just checked in and she got a no, like, don't sign it. She's like, what? She's like, fine, universe, if I'm not meant to sign this lease, which is perfect and everything I've wanted, show me some cows. It's a no. If it's a no, show me some cows. So she's driving home, and she for some reason subconsciously went her old way home, past her old house where she used to live. And there was always a cow in the paddock next to this old house. And she goes, oh, maybe the cow's not there today. And sure enough, there was the cow. And she's like, nah, that's just a coincidence. That's just because I went and defaulted to go the old way home, So then later in the afternoon, she went out with her son, and she's still like, oh my gosh, why is it a no? I don't understand. Nah, can't be a no. And her son's like, Mum, come look at this new gallery. And she's like, oh, sure enough. So she walks in, and every portrait and sculpture was of a cow. So she listened, and she's like, all right, no, like, sorry, I've changed my mind. I don't know why, kind of thing, but I've changed my mind. It's a no. A week later, the COVID lockdown started, and she would have had no brick and mortar business to actually work out of. So this is sometimes our soul knows more than what we do. But what I find is a lot of people ask for the signs, and they get the signs, and they ignore them anyway. And if you keep doing that, the universe will stop giving you signs, because no matter what they do, if they put it blindly in front of you, you're not going to see it anyway. So it's like you have to be open and you have to be willing to receive what comes through as well.
How and you said at the beginning that you burn quite hot and quite bright, and I certainly get that sense from you. There's so much you're doing, but you also know there's so much else you could be doing as well. How do you personally stay nourished and well in yourself? So I imagine you must sometimes be maybe you don't, but almost sense you get overwhelmed by so much that you could, should, would be doing. How do you look after yourself?
Well, I've had to learn this the hard way.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I'm really tired and I need to rest, I need to rest. And it's really interesting because some days I'm like, I just don't want to be on the computer today. And then if I'm meant to be interviewing someone, they'll mysteriously cancel or they won't show up. And I'm like, oh, thank you, universe. I really didn't want to sit here for another hour or whatever that looks like. And, it's about tuning in too, and giving yourself permission to rest and give yourself permission to put things down. And because I get so much inspiration, learning more about myself has been really helpful. So like, those practices, we've got astrology, we've got numerology, we've got
Mhm.
human design, we've got gene keys, we've got all these cool, amazing things, but they're all there to help you get to know yourself more. So every time I get a reading done or someone gifts me, it's amazing how many readings I've been gifted. I love it, and just looking at that from a different perspective each time. So it's like my human design, I'm a manifested generator, which means I get lots of ideas. But if I try and do all those ideas, I will burn out because
Yeah.
I will just keep pushing, pushing, pushing. What I need instead is a sign or an invitation to collaborate. So if I get an idea and I feel it's really aligned, like I was sharing with the galactic learnings, right?
Mhm.
And it's aligned, I am invited into doing something with somebody else, or I'm invited to talk about something. So another thing I do is I teach children and parents how to connect with themselves so that they can choose herbs and pick crystals and amulets. Really fun, like kind of magic camp, if you will, like Harry Potter, but in real life. And at the same time, I was like, oh, am I meant to be doing this? And I was starting to question because I didn't get many signups and things like that. And I was questioning where I live and da. And then someone rang me and said, hey, I want to talk about these camps that you run. And I was like, oh, thank you, universe. I'm still meant to be doing that. So this is where I have lots of ideas and I actually write them down. I have a journal that I purely put all my ideas in because they might be just like a future version of me, needs to do those. Or maybe it's for somebody
Mm.
else and I've been given the idea so I can give it to somebody to do it and carry it out and collaborate that way. But I write them all down and I see where they go. Like I have 6 or 7 book ideas ready to go. But at the moment, I'm like, actually, I don't want to write my book yet. And I know I'm starting to feel the urge to want to go back and revisit the next novel I'm writing, which is so left field. Anyway, I just trust. But at the same time, I'm waiting for that invitation to go back to that. So, I can feel it starting to boil. I'm like, all right. But if I try and push that creativity with not the energy behind it or without that invitation, I will either end up in burnout or I'll fizzle out or I'll do all this work and it won't go anywhere at that moment. So this is where having that feedback from myself and learning how I work best and what aligns with me best helps me from burning out or burning too bright or overcommitting myself, and also learning how to say no. That was a very
Yeah.
important part of my journey. And no being a full sentence. No.
Yeah.
No. And from writing my book, it's amazing how many scammers, when you tell them no, will still keep trying to reach out to you even after you've set that boundary. So it's been a very interesting journey in that respect too. And even sometimes when I think what I want and I get given that, if I don't feel a yes in my body, and for me, a yes is like I'll get goosebumps and I'll feel like almost this lightness of like, ah, kind of moment, like, yes, this is what I'm meant to be doing, or this is what I'm meant to be saying yes to. If I don't get that straight away, I ask questions. So just the other week, I got this invitation to take my podcast onto a network, and it was everything I wanted, Andrew. But I wasn't excited about it. I was like, can you leave that with me? I just need to sit with that. And the reason why was because I need to take a break from my podcast. And if I sign up to a network, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So this is where, when we tune into ourselves and listen, our body will start to give us the answers, and we don't have to second guess ourselves as one. And I know if it's a hell no, because then I want to vomit. That's what I get. I'm like, no. That's actually what I do. So yeah.
You've been very, very generous with your time, but I've just got two more questions, if that's okay.
Go for it.
So people have got this far on the podcast are obviously interested and engaged and have listened and hopefully learned something. But so if people are feeling maybe it's a quiet pull towards a more spiritually aligned and open life, but there is some hesitation there. What are the, and maybe it's the wrong way to put it, but what are the gentle first steps that somebody could take?
I feel it's whatever you're curious about. Let yourself explore that. So if you're curious about oracle cards, go buy an oracle card deck and just play with them, and see what happens. Do you get excited by that? If you're curious about crystals, go buy crystals. They're always like the gateway. I want to say the gateway, the crystal gateway. If you're curious about what someone does when they talk about it, go have a session with them or learn more about them. It's that curiosity that will help you start to pitter patter into that, and you don't have to jump full in. For my cousin was just getting a sound healing because she heard about it and was curious about it, and she went through this massive veil lifting, and she had this crazy episode of downloads and all this information, and she had no idea what it was. And my family didn't really know what I did at that point, and my sister said to her, you need to talk to me. And so when she rang me, I was like, oh, let me walk you through that. But she was curious, and that was what got her there in the first place. And it's always this curiosity that's, we've been conditioned that curiosity kills the cat. Well, no, curiosity is leading you on your path. It's allowing you to get there. So, and you don't have to jump full on in. Like, spirituality is not meditating every day. It's not going vegan. It's not giving up things that you truly love. I still watch TV. I don't watch it all the time because I'm more of an avid book reader. I've always been that way. Or I rather listen to music, but you don't have to give all that up. You do start to make more conscious choices, because all of a sudden things that used to resonate don't. Like, I cannot watch violent movies at all anymore, Andrew. Rom-coms for me, thank you very much. I cannot process violence. It's just too much on my system. And I'm also conscious about what music I listen to and things like that, because I like uplifting things, and that's my choice. But I have other friends in the spiritual community, and they happily go to a heavy metal concert. I'm like, fine, that's aligned for you. That's what it is. So it will look unique for you. So if you're curious and you're interested in something, just you can just research it, or you can ask ChatGPT if you really like. I've had some really fun spiritual conversations with ChatGPT, but just be curious about it and allow yourself and give yourself permission to explore it. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. And there's no right or wrong way to spirituality. Like I said, there's not a fixed script. And if you're listening to someone who says there is a fixed script, please run the other way. Yeah. Please do. Because it isn't a one-stop shop or a one-size-fits-all. It's, you want to work with people who support you and meet you where you're at and allow you to grow and expand. And if you outgrow them, they're happy to let you go.
And then my final question is, do you know what your future looks like? Yeah. I guess I think that in two ways. One is, do you have ambitions for the future of Willow Healing, the podcast, and going a network at the right time, all those sort of things? Or, yeah, how does the future sort of manifest for you, do you think?
So my biggest soul lesson is trust in divine timing. and I can tell
Okay.
you how much I hate it. Because I can see my timeline, and because I can see where I'm heading, the human part of me hates that I don't know when it will happen, right? So but what I do is make conscious choices to step towards that vision every
Hmm.
day. Does this align with my mission and where I'm heading? And even I've been invited to learn practices from my guests, and do practitioner training. And I sit there and I'm like, no, this doesn't align with where I'm heading. Thank you. But, and most of them will say, hey, well done for aligning to what you want to do. So my big mission is to create a space for children to go to where they can be themselves. There's no conditioning. They can unpack their psychic gifts. They can come back to themselves and be nurtured in such a way that they're nourished and allowed to be fully themselves without having to go through all the beautiful awakenings that we have gone through ourselves to get where we are. And it's amazing how many people I am meeting that have the same mission. And the reason is because when I first got it shown it, I was like, oh my goodness, how am I meant to do this by myself? That was my ego, right? I'm going to do it myself. But the truth is, I'm going to collaborate with so many beautiful souls around the world who all have similar missions. And it's not going to be just for children, it's for all ages. But how does that look? Okay, well, I want to speak and write and share and practice what I want to teach. I have all these beautiful downloads I get. I get insights into different things. I talk to trees. So I teach children how to connect to nature and come back to themselves and connect with trees. I believe in fairies. In fact, I caught a fairy on video. Can you believe it? It's so amazing. But at the same time, sharing that to help people come back and believe that and remember that childhood wonder. So taking those steps and aligning with myself looks like that. I see myself living in a house near the beach. I am holding on to that because I truly want that now. Like, we're selling our house. I'm like, it's happening. It's happening. I don't know when. I don't know what Spirit's plan is, but I know it's happening. And so it's about coming back and having that faith. But sometimes the vision we get shown when we surrender and allow things to come to us that are meant to, and the timing it's meant to, are beyond what we can even comprehend. It's
Yeah.
beyond what we can imagine. And sometimes we actually outgrow the dream that we originally got shown. So my original dream was for where we live now was to build a healing center on the property. But then my dream got bigger. I was like, actually, that's not big enough. I want a whole school. Like, stuff that. I want a whole school. And then my dream changed. And then suddenly I wasn't meant to be where I live anymore, because this is anchoring me and stopping me from the next step. It's not right now, but in terms of long term of where I need to go. So it's like making those powerful choices from a dream or a vision of where you want to head, and also allowing yourself to change what that is too, because sometimes our soul isn't ready to see the bigger vision. It's not
Hmm.
ready to see where we're headed, because then we would compromise our path to get there. So allow it to evolve and allow yourself the permission to shift dreams and to also change how that looks, and allow it to grow and expand, because that is what I am finding. It keeps changing how my life looks moving forward. And then I meet beautiful people, and that will shift me into another timeline as well, or another projection. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I'm working with this beautiful person at the moment. She's like, I see us both speaking on stage together. I'm like, I see that too. And I said, because we actually complement each other. I'm more the feminine, she's more the masculine. We actually were sisters in another life. Like, it's very interesting as we started to pull it apart. But at the same time, it's allowing it to come forward and allowing the dreams to evolve and allowing yourself to evolve too.
I think that's the most unique answer I've ever had to that question. But I wouldn't expect anything less. Thank you so much for your time. I know you've had a huge day of talking today, so I'm so impressed you managed to keep talking and sharing. You're sharing so much. I'm really interested to listen back now. Yeah, yeah, just fascinating. Just thank you so much for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Andrew. Absolutely.